Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. It's Sunday Fun Day here on the channel, and in today's video we are going to talk about some revisions that we're going to make to our Shapeshifter with Changeling tribal deck that of course is led by our oh-so-favorite Shapeshifter, Morophon the Boundless. Welcome back, MTG BC. Got Burge here on another Sunday Fun Day video, and in today's video we are going to take one step closer to solidifying the deck list and our Changeling pool for our Morophon the Boundless Shapeshifter Changeling tribal deck. If you missed any of the previous videos in this deck building series, you can click on the links in the description below and bring you right up to speed. So back in center, we're going to place our commander. And so let's begin by talking about some cards that we want to include into the 99. And then we'll come to the point where we're talking about the cards that are going to come out as replacements, in addition to a couple of changes to the Changeling pool. So the cards that we're adding before we talk about the land base, the cards that we're adding are specifically geared towards strengthening the deck. And in so doing, we are including some better removal. We are including some win condition cards, in addition to, and I don't know how in the worlds of Burgeoning this happened, we have no ramp in this deck. And we're going to include some ramp in this deck because, well, you have to have some form of ramp. So those are the conditions that these cards are going to meet. All right, so let's begin with our first inclusion. We are going to include Quest for Ulah's Temple. It's an enchantment that only costs 1 blue mana, and at the beginning of our upkeep, we look at the top card of our library, and if it's a creature card, we reveal it and put a quest counter on Quest for Ulah's Temple. At the beginning of each end step, if there are 3 or more quest counters on Quest for Ulah's Temple, we may put a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent creature card from our hand onto the battlefield. So as long as we can tick this up to 3 or more quest counters, we can play from our hand any one of our Shapeshifters with Changeling. And of course, for all of our discussions during our deck building revisions here, if we have our Maskwood Nexus in play, then we can pretty much put any creature from our hand right onto the battlefield. So Quest for Ulah's Temple is being included as a way in which to help ramp up and get some more creatures onto the battlefield at the end of everyone's turn. Next card that we're going to include is one of those win condition cards that we were talking about earlier, and that's going to be Dragon Tempest. It's another enchantment. This one's 1 and a red, and whenever a creature with flying enters the battlefield under our control, it gains haste until end of turn. That's not the block of text that's going to help us out that much. We do have some creatures in our Changeling pool that have flying, and there may be a Shapeshifter here or there that has flying, and there are a couple that may grant flying to all of our creatures, specifically the Wing Splicer. It is the next block of text that's going to help make this deck stronger, and that is whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under our control, it deals X damage to target creature or player, where X is the number of dragons we control. Our Shapeshifters with Changeling are dragons, so they will trigger Dragon Tempest each time one of them enters the battlefield. We can consider Dragon Tempest to be a win condition card. Next addition is to the removal side of things, and again, it revolves around the ability of getting dragons into play, and that's going to be a copy of Spitflame. It's an instant for 2 and a red that deals 4 damage to target creature. Whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under our control, we may pay a red mana, and if we do, we return Spitflame from our graveyard to our hand. It is not unreasonable to add a red mana to the casting cost. I'm sorry, that's not even a casting cost. Let me reframe that. It is not unreasonable to keep a red mana afloat for whenever one of our Shapeshifters with Changeling enter the battlefield, we can return Spitflame right from our graveyard to our hand. Investing 3 for 4 damage to target creature at instant speed, those are good numbers, and this is something that we can continue to repeat as long as a quote-unquote dragon enters the battlefield under our control. That is going to help us firm and strengthen our removal and our disruption spells in our deck. With that in mind, we're going to segue to another removal disruption spell, and that's going to be Widespread Brutality. We have a sorcery here from War of the Spark. It's 1, a black, and 2 red. We amass 2. Then the army we amassed deals damage equal to its power to each non-army creature. Now, before we proceed further, remember, our shapeshifters are armies. They're changelings, so they're every creature type. For anyone that's not familiar with the amass mechanic, what we do is we put 2 +1/+1 counters on an army we control. If we don't control one, then we create a 0/0 black zombie army creature token first. So let's say, for instance, we have one of our shapeshifters with Changeling out on the battlefield. It's a 3/3, and we amass 2. So we'll put 2 +1/+1 counters on that shapeshifter, and then Widespread Brutality will deal 5 damage to every non-army creature that's on the battlefield. How this removal spell slipped by notice at the beginning and throughout the deck building process remains a mystery, but Widespread Brutality can be a wonderfully one-sided board wipe slanted right to the benefit of our shapeshifters with Changeling. So that is going to help to enhance our removal in the deck, and that's going to move forward. Card number 5, still with the idea of disruption, we're going to include a copy of Peer Pressure. Another sorcery with a mana value of 4, this time it's 3 and a blue. We choose a creature type, and if we control more creatures of that type than any other player, we gain control of all creatures of that type. This is going to slant extremely favorably for us because, again, our shapeshifters with Changeling are every creature type. So we can take a couple of creatures on the battlefield as long as we have more of the same creature type. Peer Pressure is going to be a very sneaky potential win condition card to be included in this deck. Speaking of win condition cards, we are most likely, as hinted earlier during this deck building series, Liliana's Contract is going into the 99. It's an enchantment for 3 and 2 black that reads, when it ETBs, we draw 4 cards and lose 4 life. Spoiler, don't cast this if you have 4 or less life. At the beginning of your upkeep, if we control 4 or more demons with different names, we win the game. Again, our shapeshifters with Changeling are demons. And as long as we've got at least 4 of them and Liliana's Contract remains on the battlefield and nobody interferes, we win the game. Liliana's Contract is going to be one of our win conditions. Going back to the idea of enhancing our removal and disruption spells in this deck, we're going to include a copy of Crux of Fate. 3 and 2 black, we choose 1, destroy all dragon creatures, or destroy all non-dragon creatures. Again, our shapeshifters with Changeling are also dragons, so we are most likely always going to choose destroy all non-dragon creatures. Now, for me, in my metagame, dragon commander decks are not very rare, so there could be the purposes of this just destroying their dragons. But again, that's a meta-specific decision. For the purposes of our shapeshifter with Changeling deck, Crux of Fate is going to be very advantageous by leaving our shapeshifters with Changeling on the battlefield and putting all of our creatures that are all of the creatures that our opponents control that aren't dragons right into the graveyard. Okay, and as we also discussed, we are going to include some ramp because I don't know how it happened. We included no ramp in this deck. So of course that means we're putting in a Soul Ring. Yeah, we did not have a Soul Ring included in this deck. How? I don't know how that happened. Somebody is going to have to explain that one to me. We're also going to include an Arcane Signet because, again, that wasn't included. And again, with the idea of keeping the ramp out ahead of us, particularly in a 5-color deck, we're going to include a copy of Thelwar Stone, as long as our opponents aren't all playing with colorless decks, which is a feat that is as rare as winter roses. Thelwar Stone should be able to help us fix our mana in this 5-color shapeshifter deck. And rounding out the mana ramp that we're going to include is another mana rock that actually is going to fall right in line with our Changeling mechanic, and that's going to be a copy of Altar of the Pantheon. Now, generally, I like to stay around 2 for my mana rocks, but this one has flavor, so I decided to include it nonetheless. It does have a mana value of 3, and it says our devotion to each color and each combination of colors is increased by 1, but we don't have anything in this deck currently that deals with devotion. So that first block of text is kind of meaningless for what we want Altar of Pantheon to accomplish while being in the 99 of our build. However, we can tap this to add 1 mana of any color, which is fantastic in a 5-color deck, and if we control a god, a demigod, or a legendary enchantment, we will gain 1 life. Although I don't believe the legendary enchantment is going to imply very much for us in this deck, having a god or a demigod most certainly will, because again, our Shapeshifters with Changeling are gods and demigods. So Altar of the Pantheon is going to be included as a way in which to stay on flavor, give us another creature type, give us some mana fixing, and gain some incidental life. All right, so before we move into some of the lands that we want to include, we're going to talk about a couple of cards that we are going to take out of the Changeling pool and include in the 99. So not only are we going to add some cards to the 99, we're going to add a couple of cards to the Changeling pool to take the place of the ones we're taking out. And the first card that we're taking out is actually the very first card that entered into the Changeling pool, and that's going to be Didgeridoo. This artifact is just too powerful to not have permanently stationed in the 99 of our deck. It has a mana value of 1, and we can tap 3 and put a Minotaur from our hand directly into play, and that's at instant speed. We do not have to abide by timing restrictions that usually are for creatures. So Didgeridoo gives us the ability to put any creature that is a shapeshifter with Changeling, or of course if we have Maskwood Nexus in play, right from our hand into play for just 3 colorless mana. This card is just too strong overall for what we want to do in this deck to not include it in the 99. So we are taking out Didgeridoo from the Changeling pool and adding it to the deck itself. And the second card that we are taking out of the Changeling pool to add to the deck is something that's similar in feature-wise to Altar of the Pantheon, and that's going to be Mere Reservoir. It's an artifact that will act as a mana rock for us. It has a mana value of 3. We can tap to add 2 colorless to our mana pool, but we can spend this only to cast Mirror spells or activate abilities of Mirror. Again, our Shapeshifters with Changeling are also Mirror, so this is going to give us 2 colorless mana as long as the mana is used to cast a Mirror or an activated ability of a Mirror spell or a Mirror ability. And additionally, this also gives us some graveyard recursion because we can tap 3 and tap this and return a Mirror card from our graveyard to our hand. So this helps us to accelerate our mana and acts as graveyard recursion for our Shapeshifters with Changeling. It just seemed like a card that could overall benefit much more by being in the 99 as opposed to being shuffled around in the Changeling pool. All right, so those are the spells, and here are the lands that we're going to include as a way in which to help put more flavor into the deck and at the same time strengthen the ability to play with a 5-color deck by fixing the colors and enhancing the mana. And the first one, again, similar to the ramp spells that we did not include, how we did not include a Path of Ancestry is beyond me. This is going to be perfect. Now, unfortunately, it does ETB tapped. However, we can tap for 1 mana of any color, and if we use that color of mana to cast a creature spell that shares a type with Morophon, which is every, because he's a shapeshifter with Changeling, then we scry 1. So every time we play a creature with Path of Ancestry, we will forever scry 1. So I have no idea why that eluded us, but Path of Ancestry is definitely going in with the land base. Also going in is going to be a copy of Sliver Hive. It does tap for a colorless mana, but it also taps for a colored mana that we can use to only cast a sliver spell. Again, Shapeshifters with Changeling, they're slivers too. We can also tap 5 and tap Sliver Hive to put a 1/1 Sliver creature token onto the battlefield, which we can only do if we control a Sliver. So there is a little bit of concern with the restriction of this only giving us colorless mana for our non-Sliver spells, but we will be able to see how beneficial this land will be through gameplay and playtesting. So Sliver Hive is going in as a way in which to give 5 color mana to our changelings, to our shapeshifters with Changeling, and the ability to put in some Sliver tokens if needed. Following suit with Sliver Hive, we are going to include a copy of Haven of the Spirit Dragon. It's very similar to what Sliver Hive does with its first 2 abilities by providing a colorless mana, or 1 mana of any color that can only be used to cast a dragon spell. All of the things we said for Sliver Hive is applicable to Haven of the Spirit Dragon, except we do not get to create dragon tokens with Haven of the Spirit Dragon because we can tap this and sacrifice it to return a dragon creature card. It also says a Eugen Planeswalker card, but Eugen won't be in this deck, from our graveyard to our hand. So a little bit more graveyard recursion won't be a problem in a deck that's going to run a lot of creatures. Next up, we are going to include Eldrazi Temple, and this is going to help be the Eldrazi representative of not the Changeling pool, but just the Eldrazi representative of our Shapeshifter deck. Taps for a colorless mana, but taps to add 2 colorless if we spend this to cast a colorless Eldrazi spell or an activated ability of a colorless Eldrazi. So again, this is pretty similar to what we were talking about with Mirror Reservoir. We can add 2 colorless mana as long as we are using that to cast an Eldrazi spell. And again, Shapeshifters with Changeling, well, they're Eldrazi too. All right, the next 2 cards are going to be some pet cards that are being included to push the flavor, but also to help strengthen the deck. So through gameplay and playtesting, we're going to see exactly how beneficial these inclusions will be. The first is going to be Contested Cliffs. It can only, under any circumstances, give us a colorless mana, unless, of course, we have the World Tree in play. But we can also tap a red, tap a green, and tap Contested Cliffs to have target beast we control fight target creature and opponent controls. So this is one of those cards that's going to help us enhance and strengthen our removal in the deck. Again, through gameplay and playtesting, we'll see if Contested Cliffs can stay in a 5-color deck that does not provide any colored mana in any way, shape, or form. And the last land that we're going to include that is somewhat similar to Contested Cliffs, not so much from a removal standpoint, but maybe from some disruption, that's going to be a copy of Swarmyard. It only gives us a colorless mana, but we can tap it to regenerate target insect, rat, spider, or squirrel. So this could play, it could play some role in some combat tricks. We can save one of our best shapeshifters with Changeling from a board wipe. We're, again, going to test out this card similar to the Contested Cliffs to see if it's a viable inclusion in the land base in our deck. All right, and those are all of the inclusions that are going into the 99. So what's coming out? All right, briefly, what's coming out of the 99 is going to be, we're taking out Universal Automaton. It doesn't add much other than a body for 1 colorless mana. It is a Changeling. So we're just going to have to keep an eye to make sure that we have a number of changelings that are needed to do what we want with the deck. Again, that will come through gameplay and playtesting. We are also going to take out Imposter of the Sixth Pride. It is a changeling, but it adds nothing to the team. It's just a 3/1 for a mana value of 2. Similar to Woodland Changeling, it adds nothing else other than just being a changeling. So it's going to come out. It's just a changeling bear. And so is Guardian Gladewalker. This is a 1/1 that comes in to, at best, put a +1/+1 on counter on a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So at most, this is just a Woodland Changeling. And I think the cards that we're adding are going to be so much better than the cards we're taking out in every way, as long as we don't lose our Changeling flavor. And we'll find that out, again, through gameplay and playtesting. Ghostly Changeling is going to come out, a mana value of 3 for a 2/2. It does have Swamp Breathing at +1/+1, but it costs 1 and a black to do that. It's not the traditional Shade where it's just a black for a +1/+1. So it felt easy to take that Changeling out. particularly because it also doesn't offer anything to the team and has no evasion. Now that we've talked about some of the creatures that are coming out, which we will return to momentarily. We're also going to take out Birthing Boughs. It's an artifact for 3. We can create changelings with this, but for an investment of 4 into an artifact that costs 3, it doesn't seem like that's going to play very well with the mana numbers, particularly because we're trying to make sure that we have balance throughout the deck, and some pieces are going to have to become a little weaker to make others stronger. But I think by doing this, it will make the overall deck even stronger. All right, so next up, we're going to take out Journey to Oblivion. The party mechanic seems to be strong, but in really thinking about this, to have multiple creatures in play in order to have this cost less for what it does, it just seemed to make more sense that we should put in a more reliable removal spell. I mean, a Journey to Oblivion that could be 2 and a white, maybe if we have a couple of creatures in play, versus a Spitflame. I mean, I know Spitflame is just for a creature, while this is any non-land permanent until Journey to Oblivion leaves play. Again, play testing, we're going to find out what happens with Journey to Oblivion. Same thing is with Deadly Alliance. Again, everything that we said about Journey to Oblivion applies to Deadly Alliance. There's just better removal that we can use in our deck and still stay flavorful for what we're doing. Day of Judgment is coming out, and this can be directly correlated to the inclusion of Crux of Fate. Destroying all creatures is not as beneficial to us as destroying all non-dragon creatures. Next up is Thwart the Grave. We included multiple spells to help us recur creature cards, now not necessarily right to the battlefield, but bringing them back to our hand. Again, this is also sorcery speed with the party mechanic. We're going to see exactly if we're going to benefit by putting in something that's a little quicker that we can do at any point in time that gets it right to our hand and not the battlefield. Bringing out Spoils of Adventure is also going to be beneficial for the deck. Again, we are relying on having creatures on the battlefield, which we probably should not, because if we don't have them, then we're looking at a well overcosted spell that only gains us 3 life and draws 3 cards. So Spoils of Adventure is going to come out. And the last 2 cards that are going to come out to make way for these inclusions is going to be another Changeling. This one is Valiant Changeling. This one kind of falls in line with what we were talking about with the party mechanic. And at best, we got a double striker that's 3/3 for a mana value of 7. We can do a lot better, particularly with some of the other cards that we put in here as a way in which to strengthen the overall deck. And the last card coming out that's not a land that's going to help kind of make our removal overall better is we're going to take out Finale of Eternity. I just think there are other removal spells that we added, like Crux of Fate, like Widespread Brutality, that will do the job better. All right, because we brought some lands in, we got to take some lands out, and the first one that's going to come out is Field of the Dead, because we added some lands for flavor that only give us colorless mana. If there was something that really wasn't doing it for us, that only gave us colorless mana, then we really had to think about taking it out, and that's why Field of the Dead is coming out. Particularly because we can't have too many cards that are only going to give us colorless mana. Now, lastly, because we are including a Path of Ancestry, a Sliver Hive, and a Haven of the Dragon Spirit that could potentially act as 5-color lands, we're going to take out our 5 Triomes, and we're going to hope that that's going to be enough to work out the mana. Again, through play testing gameplay, we will find out. And lastly, before we end, the 2 cards that are going to go into the Changeling pool to take the place of Didgeridoo and Mirror Reservoir, those 2 cards are going to be Blight Mound and the Spawning Kraken. So the Blight Mound is going to be the pest representative for the Changeling pool, giving pests we control +1/+0 and Menace. And the Spawning Kraken is going to be either our Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent representative in the Changeling pool, and it's just going to help us make our deck better. So these are going to go into the Changeling pool to take the place of Mirror Reservoir and Didgeridoo. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.